Good morning, and welcome to Keycode Media's Inputs Outputs, a series dedicated to giving you short technical tutorials for the post, broadcast, production, and audiovisual industries. Each presentation is going to run around 20 minutes and will be followed with a live Q&A with you, the audience. I'm your host, Jeff Sengpiel. Today, we're inviting the folks from Blackmagic Design to join us to discuss DaVinci Resolve post-production in 2020. Having myself worked in theatrical and episodic television post-finishing for several years, I was familiarized with DaVinci's Resolve product and how it was utilized in color grading for digital intermediate workflows quite a while ago. Did you know that Resolve was initially released in 2004 as a dedicated hardware product? 5 years later, with an install base of around 100 systems, DaVinci got acquired by Blackmagic Design, igniting one of the most rapid evolutions of a product in our industry. Version 7 shifted from the old hardware model with support for Mac, codecs like ProRes, and support of multiple GPUs, red camera files, and Linux. And the new cost made it accessible to so many more of us in the business. Blackmagic has continued to pack Resolve with useful features, with little things like Windows support, Fusion VFX, Fairlight audio, Dolby Vision and HDR10+, full XML, AAF, and EDL support, and along the way, pushed into nonlinear editing in a big way, with all sorts of recent enhancements that make the system easier, faster, and more featured than ever before. And the editor keyboard, that jog shuttle, it's like butter. All right, enough with my trip into the Wayback Machine. Let's get started on what cool new stuff there is in Resolve today. I see that Sean Carlson with Blackmagic is getting ready for our demo, but before we jump into that, I wanted to briefly introduce Keycode Media to those that are new to us. Keycode Media is an industry-leading systems integrator with a small army of engineers specialized in broadcast, post-production, and audiovisual solutions. If you need equipment, we have it. If you have a complex problem, we've likely solved it. If you need support, our engineers are available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. At the end of the Resolve Prezzo, we invite all of you to participate in the live Q&A. Please submit your questions via the Vimeo, Facebook Live, or YouTube chats. We'll try our best to answer all of them. Sean, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Keycode, for having us. I'm Sean Carlson, a product specialist for Blackmagic Design. I'm here to show you the latest key features in DaVinci Resolve 16. Overall performance boost across several tools and functions, superscale on input or delivery, Fusion title templates, additional hardware acceleration of exports to H.264 and H.265. All the AVI formats are accelerated. So this is your assistant editorial editor, seat, configuration. Depending on your resolution, if you right-click here, you can say Show Icons Only, or under the Workspace menu, you can actually disable the navigation entirely. If you know all the keyboard shortcuts, this is not a big deal. Check our keyboard customization options if you want to learn our shortcuts. If there's a keystroke assigned, you'll see it here. If there isn't, then just click and add one. So I'll just save that and close. Project settings here control the master settings, the timeline resolution, the video monitoring settings, image scaling, whether I'm going to scale the entire image to fit on input or output. But new to Resolve 16, new timeline, Control N. Now, instead of just automatically creating a new timeline at the master project settings, I can choose to use a custom setting. And that gives me full access to the format where I can change my resolution as well as the frame rate. So say I have to deliver this music video cut to 2997. Mismatch resolution files again. I have my own determination for image scale, as well as my monitoring. So since this was previously being monitored at 24, and I now want to monitor this at 2997, I'll select that. And my output. Do I want to output at this new 1080 resolution if I had changed my format to, say, UHD, and output it matches underneath by default if this is set. Otherwise, I can customize it. So let's go back to 1080. We don't need to play around with UHD today. After all, I'm compressing this video down into the size of a thumbnail for you. If I was working in UHD, it would be much harder to see. Output, timeline settings, and again, mismatch is set to scale to fit. So let's just give this a unique name. Typing is good. Okay, custom timeline settings. Let's cut something in. Now I can drag right here, or I can drag over the overlay. It's like, great, let's just append it in. And we have our new timeline playing 2997 with Pocket Cinema 6K camera Blackmagic RAW footage. Let's do some specific corrections. I like to show face refinement in this case. Now with the tracking complete, let's expose her face under the overlay and switch to Beauty Advanced. Now, the beauty tools and the texture tools and the smoothing have all been reorganized a little bit inside Face Refinement. So now in Beauty Advanced mode, which is new, as well as Beauty Automatic, we have the smoothing options with diffuse sliding, texture threshold, add texture, recovery amount, and color grading section is all color grading section. Woohoo! The color grading section, and here let me put myself on the other side. There we go. All right. The color grading section here has the contrast, midtone, color boost, tint, desaturate, shadow, and shine removal. So if she's a little shiny, you know, shine removal will drop those reflections. Just take them down a hair. Not quite so much. And then midtone, right? This is the lightness on her face. So let's give her a little bit more. Color boost, this is going to enhance the lesser saturated areas. So if she's not wearing saturated makeup, there we go. Tint, of course, is just what you would expect. I'm applying a tint, either green or red in this case. So I'm applying a little bit more red. And then if I wanted to desaturate shadows, if I'm getting color in my shadow, I can take shadow out on her face. Each one of these can be reset. Just double click them. And now let's look at the smoothing threshold. If we just go back to smoothing, we have fewer options. Smoothing, detail, size, and detail. So we're adding detail back and we're thresholding by detail size. And Beauty Automatic is really just amount and scale. So if I just said great, let's just give her more of that one button click beauty. Smooths out her forehead automatically, although we do have forehead retouching, which is a separate button for smoothing, as well as lip and eye. So let's push a little sharpening in the eye. That's great, a little bit better. A little brighter in the whites and a little highlight, maybe if she's being underlit. She looks fine. Eye bag removal, again, we can smooth that out just a little bit. So there she is. There's our update. Let's go ahead and put that back. She looks a little smoother, a little tiny bit more saturated. Switch to the edit page again. Let's show you the compound clip. Remember, compound clips now retain their alpha channel. So let's show what a compound clip is by opening it in its timeline. That's down here with the breadcrumb trail. We just double click it back, right click, open in timeline to expose it. So the timeline, I added a couple of things. One is this 3D lower third, and then the next is this text plus. And here are the tools. This text plus overlay is just doing a little animated tracking. I could decide to modify these, but I just set 2 keyframes. So if you're looking at this and you really needed to tweak the keyframes, I would recommend we switch to the Fusion page. Now, workspace, show page, or switch to page, Fusion is Shift 5. So let's do that now. In Fusion, you'll see that this Fusion title template actually has a lot more controls. So there's my tracking control, and you can see that I have some keyframes set because I have a little arrow that determines it. If you hover over it, it tells you there's our data. Now let's look at the keyframe palette. There it is, character spacing. In fact, it's over here somewhere, so I'm just going to zoom to fit. These are my keyframes. Do I like the position of the keyframes? Do I think maybe they're off on their timing? Do they happen a little too straightforward and with linear interpolation? Yeah, so first let's drop this back to the beginning, and then I'll stretch this out to the end. And then, since the keyframe palette is great for manipulating the timing of my keyframes, deciding when and where they should be, but it's the spline palette that I really want when I want to look into the keyframe and its performance quality. So here are my keyframes, but plotted on the spline graph, and you can see now it's a linear acceleration. So I will select both of those points, and you see now that there are Bezier handles to break off. With the smooth function, which is either Shift S to smooth, or in this case I'm going to flatten the curve out and put the handles here. I'm going to hit F to flatten them. Very simply. Now I've got a nice ramp. Let's just isolate this one really quickly and hit play. There it is. There's my soft acceleration curve leading to soft deceleration curve. Now, if what I really wanted to do was make this start faster and then end more gradually, let's just see how I like this one. Yep, I like it. We'll keep it. So there you have it. I manipulated some keyframes that I set in the edit page. Here in the Fusion page, that meant I have the keyframe panel to decide where the keyframe timing happens, and I have the spline panel to decide the quality of animation. And I can hide these as needed. Now, just returning to the edit page with Shift 4, you'll see that's updated. There it is. There's my new retiming. Lower third, 3D lower third. Again, same idea. I could drop into the Fusion page and look at this, but I think I'm going to leave it as is. It's fine. And then I'm going to move back into my compound clip over here, and you'll see the result of what I just did. Here, let's play back, give it some time. All right. Now, if your system needed to cache this, you might consider using the user or smart cache. There's a preference that you can set where your smart cache will automatically determine the kinds of things it should cache for you, and write to disk for easier playback. If I have cache on, I usually do user cache. That allows me to specify just what part of the clip or what clip I think I need to cache. So now I can right click and say render cache for color output. I want this to be fully playable without having to render in real time while I'm in the color page so that I can throw some additional grade on these clips. So when I move to the color page, you'll see the compound clip is here. And if I chose to grade over the compound clip, you see that it's really not affecting the clips underneath it as you would expect. So what I'm going to do with the compound clip actually is I'm going to grade underneath it. And if I turn on the timeline, you'll see that the compound clip is actually sitting above on V2. I just want to select the clip below it on V1. So if I needed to throw a grade on top of this, let's add a new, there we go. Let's add a new node. And in Resolve effects, something I would normally just do with a window, a power window. Yeah, let's sort again. We just added vignette to version 16. So there's a nice, quick, easy method of adding a simple controllable vignette shape over the top. That's in basic mode. In advanced mode, we have a lot more control over the position, the shape, the softness. There's my grade. Now let's take that off a loop, see how it plays through. Right? Keycode media, first line, second line. That compound clip just played over the top because I cached it. So it didn't matter what I was doing under here. Switch back to the edit page now. Because one way that you might be able to pull this off is to go to the effects library, effects, adjustment clip, and drop the adjustment clip over this. I'm just going to move my compound clip back and take this space. Because the adjustment clip can actually be graded. So let's move to the color page and show you what I mean. Adjustment clip shows up here. It actually shows through now, and that's an indication that you can grade it. Here you can see this is black. So adjustment clip, let's do this. Let's take saturation down in this area. Let's push the gamma up, and maybe we want to throw in some kind of a light effect. So light rays. Well, let's just look at some of our other options. Resolve effects light. Let's do a glow. Let's add a little glow. It's going to blow out here. I want to see just the area that would be glowing right now based on my shine threshold. Make it easier to adjust which parts I want to be hot, and then how much they spread. So a combination of these things can get a very, very soft glow. And of course I can pick a different color if I wanted to, like just a soft light pink glow, great. And do I want it just on the shiny regions, or do I want it across everything? So there, glowing image, there's my pink glow toggled on and off. Okay, go back to the edit page. And let's just extend this right as she's looking back at him the whole way. So I actually want this on the whole clip. So let's take it on the whole clip. She looks back at him, and then she smiles, and we go away, and then the sun, and then there's a blur. So let's just take that. Let's take it out here. Let's say, just extend that here. Just right. Then we move back into another area. Yeah, I think we'll leave it out to this spot here. And since we have these control handles, I'm just going to go ahead and softly fade us out at the end. And play. And there's our transition out of the glow. So adjustment clips can be really useful. Some of the new features that we have that some of the new features we have that cross over between the edit page and the color page, as well as the fusion page, include some of the new Resolve effects. You can download DaVinci Resolve from our website today. There are two versions. One, a studio version for $299 that has all the tools that I've shown off today, as well as many more that I didn't even get into. For students or anyone else on a tight budget, you can use our free version. It's hardly limited. In fact, it lets you deliver up to UHD 2160p 60, a great solution to your on-set or post workflow needs. Thank you for watching today, and now I'll hand it back to Keycode for the Q&A.
All right, thanks, Sean. Now we're live with the Q&A. So please drop your questions into the YouTube, Facebook Live, or Vimeo chat sections. Let's take a look and see what people want to know. First question from Dale. Oh, can you move your pip to the bottom right to cover the RGB parade so we can see selections in the inspector, please? I think it's a little late for that, so we might be able to take a look at that a little later. Joe is asking, will this be available after it ends? Yes, the Facebook and YouTube feeds will be available. So on the timelines, can I have multiple timelines for different deliverables in the same project, Sean?
Yeah, actually, that's one of the new great features. Originally, you would set it by master project settings, and that would rule all of your timelines. But now you can simply right-click, create a new timeline, choose the custom format option. You get custom format, monitoring, and output options for each individual timeline.
Are you able to cut an entire timeline that exists into a new timeline? So say you've got, you edit in 2398, but you've got a 2999 deliverable. Can you just create the new sequence and then drop the entire old sequence into it, retiming it?
Yeah, I mean, you could either cut in from one sequence to another using it in the source viewer. There's an option to the edit menu that's essentially to decompose on edit. So it would drag over as soon as you marked your in-out points, or if you just used keyboard shortcuts, you would have a fully decomposed cut. And the easiest is probably just to do copy and paste. Just open both timelines with the tabbed interface and then just copy between one and paste into the other.
Control-C, Control-V, it solves many, many problems. How do shared projects for editorial work in Resolve?
So that involves the collaborative workflow, and a couple of things are needed. So everyone has to be on the studio version, excuse me, first of all. And that means that we're basically sharing a project across the PostgreSQL database. So that's yet again another location. Now, the way that the Resolve installer allows you to do this is you can use your dongle or license, run the installer, and activate that particular node, install the Postgres server or the project server app, and that can be your database server on the network. As long as everyone has access to it and we're on the same subnet, then the easy networking means everyone can see the same database, and now collaborative can be enabled on a project, which you can do in the file menu or you can do in the project manager. Once collaboration has been enabled, all of the necessary clients then get to double-click from the project manager to open it. The bin locking is either set up for first come, first serve into a bin. So you might want to organize your bins accordingly so that everyone has a named bin, assistant editor, primary editor. And then you also have to worry about a little crossover when you're talking about this, because everyone's going to have write access to the same timeline potentially, but that's limited by the collaborative tools. So the person with write access on an open timeline will have a red playhead. Everyone else will have a gray playhead, so you know that you won't be able to make any editorial changes. Also, every bin where the timeline actually exists will be locked to editorial changes to anyone else. And there's an explicit lock that you can give to a bin. So you can right-click on that bin and decide, this is now locked, even if you have to leave the bin. Because otherwise what happens is you touch a bin, you open a timeline from within it, you're now the editor. That means that simultaneous work can happen between the assistant editor and the editor in things such as, separate bins, new content. If you wanted to say, hand off a new media card, load this, add metadata, you'll have access to it in your own bin. The colorist can simultaneously work on this because we have a per shot lock. So even in an open timeline where the editor is trimming, the colorist or multiple colorists can be working on the same timeline, getting the grade down. And that also works the same for the Fusion page, because Fusion is, a per comp or a per plate VFX workflow. So everything is one shot at a time. And you have a per shot lock on the Fusion page, just like the color page, per timeline on the edit page or the Fairlight page. And then you also have the access that you would get to any other shared database, which is in the deliver page. You can actually target other systems that are available on your network to render. So you can hand off render tasks.
That's a really tight integration. That sounds awesome. Question kind of on the shared. Is it possible to share the cache between two or more systems? You've done a cache of a compound clip?
Yeah, I mean, if you're working across multiple supported OSs and you're playing between Windows, Mac, and Linux, then in that case, as long as there's a NAS or a SAN that everyone has access to because they're all on the same network, and you can point to centralized storage for that, just pick a format that everyone can write to and everyone can read from. But one of the new features in 16 actually with regard to collaborative workflow is that in such a varied computer system, facility setup, you might want to have individual cache. Now, yes, perhaps if you have one hero system and you have a bunch of, smaller, lesser systems around that maybe you can't push the 4K around or 8K around or, God forbid, 12K around, then, you will clearly benefit from a shared cache workflow. But a lot of people are choosing to do local cache.
Understandable. Mark is asking if we can retain audio metadata when syncing double system dailies.
Retaining audio metadata. Yes, actually, when you sync your double system or dual system or second system, because I use all those terms interchangeably, I don't know which one I learned first, but so I'll just say dual system. When you're syncing it back, the audio essentially will populate all the metadata into the synced clips, and you retain, the linked clip name. We actually track IXML names and metadata tags. So that's something new now to the version 16 that came out with its improvement to the AAF export options for Pro Tools.
Very cool. Jordy is asking, how do you switch between individual and shared cache?
Shared cache would be when the person involved has the edit control over the project settings. And again, in a collaborative environment, that would be, the editor or the person involved who opened it first, who decided the project. And in that workflow, perhaps you just have your assistant editors go in, generate all the projects that you're going to need in their specs, including, dedicating a per project NAS or SAN directory for those caches. Local cache is where you basically choose a local override, and that's an option for you to decide. It's probably best to choose it, locally to an internal as opposed to, a local other network location, just to make sure that the system doesn't have too many random network locations bouncing back and forth. Of course, most of them can handle this, but adding new network locations while you're drawing from the media across the network can be problematic sometimes.
Yeah, it's good to have someone manage that who's outside of the edit bay, I think. Dale is asking, when you change frame rate from 2398 to 2997, does it show the change in runtime in the timeline, like a track or a view that shows the 23 time code and the 29 time code for accurate time of day runtime?
Well, actually, it's going to conform to the timeline playback rate. So you have an option with all of the clips that are in the media pool on how you want to play them back. And, an example of this is if you were to overshoot, 8K at 5994 and then decide that you're playing it back in a 24 playback timeline or 2398 timeline, then you clearly have, a little bit over twice as long of a clip, right, played back at 24. But you can interpolate that clip as 5994. It'll play back at the original resolution as well, and then frame rate as well. And if you had dropped it into a lower 24 playback, then you'll just be dropping the frames to make up the time. But that's something that's available to you in the retiming options too. If you think about it, you might want to drop a 5994 and 24. Play some of it back as your overcrank, and then use speed ramps to pick up where you wanted to play back quicker.
Yeah, I've seen that also where folks will copy an entire timeline into basically another timeline, so they have the ability to see the tracking. Usually that's between 25 and 29, where you get done with the 25 frame sequence and then you discover, oh, I'm missing a couple of minutes because I need more program material to fit. So that's always a challenge going between those different pieces. Let's see. Dan is asking, does Resolve support multicam editing with colored clips that represent on the timeline? Represent.
Colored clips that represent on the timeline. I guess I'm not clear on what they're asking.
Well, I think what I've seen folks do before in some applications, they'll go in and hey, camera 1 is red, camera 2 is green, camera 3 is blue, and camera 4 is violet. And then when I cut them into the timeline in multicam, the colors from the bin basically are represented down the timeline, so I can look at it and say, oh, that's camera 3 because it's purple, the clip I'm sitting on in the timeline.
Sure. So kind of pre-designing your checkerboard in a way.
Yes.
Yeah, you can do that. I mean, a multicam clip in Resolve, well, there's a couple of ways now. There's kind of a more simplistic method of it that's been introduced in version 16 with the sync bins. Essentially, everything in the bin that shares the same time code, the sync bin automatically sees them, lines them up together, and you can cut in the cut page using that mode. Now, as far as the edit page, a more traditional, source record linear timeline view and interface, then you might want to manage that in your media pool, because we'll inherit into the timeline whatever color you've decided on the clips, whereas you can always color clips after the fact in the timeline as well. So in a multicam, you would, in the media pool, right-click on whatever clips that were your angles, decide if, angles 3 across all of your camera were going to be green. Fine. Then you could assign that green clip color, and then it would also follow.
Very cool. Question from Jonathan. Does the render page have any new features?
There are a few preset options here, in fact, since I don't recall them directly.
If you want to go ahead and
there's greater frame IO integration, of course, but also some of the things that we've improved in version 16 include AMD hardware acceleration for H.265 and H.264 on Mac OS. Some of the Windows NVIDIA card optimizations are already there for Windows, but this is kind of catching up for Mac when version 16 came out to allow for hardware acceleration of it as well. So those are some of the few things. The DCPs, IMFs, supplemental IMFs, the ability to export the Dolby Vision XML in a 2.9 estimate from a 4.0 master. A few of the things, being able to call up your tone mapping when you're making your SDR exports as well from the deliver page. Those are new.
Very cool. Can any of the new effects be promoted or used as a template to move into Fusion?
Yeah, actually, many of them. And the example that I showed earlier was just the like one of the simple ones. If you take any of the Fusion title templates, drop it into a timeline, you've got the ability to customize those tools in the edit timeline, in the edit inspector, when any clip is selected, including those. But if you simply move into the Fusion page at that point with the playhead over the clip, you'll find that you have, all of the standard Fusion interface now available to the same templates. So it's almost like you could reverse engineer the template, figure out how to make one of your own, or customize it at that point, save and export a comp, save iterations in the same comp if you want to.
Excellent. So remote editorial. What are some editors doing to edit remotely with Resolve, and probably notably Resolve 16?
Yeah, well, we have some customers that are definitely working on this now. And, while we don't in any way suggest a particular workflow for this, we do know that we've seen it working pretty reliably, Teradici to AWS or Azure. And depending on, what your setup is, the virtual machines that you can launch Resolve into in that environment include the ability to run multiple nodes. So you could, in theory, you could toss 3 nodes open, have 2 client machines and 1 database, and all kind of interchange that way, And I think that's probably what a lot of people are doing. The other aspects of the post work, color grading, we've had a direct connection for remote grading for a while. It's remote editorial. That's the new, the new big thing, and trying to find ways to make that work for everyone. Some of our other devices, like, the web presenter and the A10 Mini and the Mini Pro now, offering us, high quality video output from connected Blackmagic cameras, is yet another way that some people are doing this, where, virtual cinematography even. So.
Very cool. And with remote grading, we've actually worked out something with one of our storage vendors where we can create proxies that'll go on the system that's at home. So they're really lightweight. They don't, take up that much storage. And then the big heavy lifting's done back at the ranch, per se, on the heavy system. So everything mirrors. And then you take your console, your big, grading console home, and you attach it to this little computer, and you get all of that, but you're making it all happen back at the facility. Takes care of that one. There's a question from Rick. It actually sounds like a troubleshooting question, GPU error messages. Rick, please reach out to, go to Keycode's website, reach out to us, and we can deal with that on a support level, as it looks like there's some different questions that are popping up there. Let's see here. Was there anything new on in color spaces, like HDR10 plus, or anything past that? Maybe being able to grade multiple deliverables at once. I
mean, there's ways of making that happen. Obviously, if you're doing Dolby Vision HDR10 plus, we engage the level 1 and access the tools for Dolby Vision level 1 mastering in the studio version, as shipping. Of course, if you add to that the Dolby Vision license direct from Dolby, then we open up the panel, which gives you your secondary trims. Within that, you have the ability to grade in your 2100 or 2020 SMPTE 2084 EOTF, and then simultaneously be able to pipe the second version, your trim down to SDR with the tone mapping controls in the color page. So if you're using our devices, which obviously I would recommend, But you know, the Ultra Studio line, like the Ultra Studio for the Thunderbolt 3 crowd, the 4K Mini is a great one. The Extreme 3, rack mount 3-unit, and then of course the PCIe, internal crowd would use the deck link like the 12G and the 8K Pro. And all of those solutions have the ability to use and engage dual SDI outputs. So essentially, you get the Dolby Vision CMU, the content mapping unit, internally.
Without having to buy the external unit, which I don't think still passes audio. That was always a little sore point with those things. I think we got getting a note that we got lots of folks watching, but not many questions. I think that just means that it's well explained. I guess then we'll go for the wrap up. So I would say that's all the time we have, but we do have a little bit more time. But I'll apologize to Matt Damon anyway. If you've got any questions about Resolve or interest in the Ursa Mini Pro 12K camera that Blackmagic just dropped this morning, please don't hesitate to reach out to us here at Keycode Media. Please like and subscribe if those buttons are in your platform that you're watching on. Sean, thanks for joining us today, and I want everyone to have a great week.
Thanks so much for having me.